with championship leaders Hutchison and Bergman languishing down in 8th place.
The day starts early for off-road races, and the Carnival City lights at the entrance to the East Rand Entertainment Complex were still shining brightly as teams started preparing for what was going to be a tough day. For Hannes Grobler, the tactics were simple.
We're just going to try and stick and stay in the front and see what the special is going to do in front of us. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of dust, and hopefully we don't hit any rocks or have a flat wheel. We hope to be at the end in the first position.
The pits were a hive of early morning activity, and after a sparkling performance on the prologue, Mark Corbett was full of the joys of spring.
Yeah, we had a good run yesterday. Went very well. We qualified first overall, managed to beat all the SPs and the specials. So it's a nice starting position for us, and I think we've got about a minute and a half over the guy behind us.
With his championship hopes still alive, Total Motorsport driver Shamir Variawa was looking for a good result, and his prediction was for a race run at a fast pace.
Very fast, very fast. It's flat out racing. There's rocks, there's dongas, but I think most of the time you're sitting on high gear, you know, and I think with our car it plays an important role because we have the horsepower, and I think today we'll do well.
With 99 national and regional championship entries, the Highveld 400 field was littered with some exotic, very fast and very expensive machinery. A ceremonial start at the Carnival City complex had also drawn a good turnout of off-road enthusiasts, with Mark Corbett and Rudy Balzar the first car to be flagged away.
Second on the road were Gerard du Plessis and Ferdi Segers, with Hannes Grobler and Jean Moore the first of the production vehicles.
There was never any doubt that Shamir Variawa's prediction of a race run at a fast pace was going to be right on the money, and Mark Corbett and Rudy Balzar were quick out of the starting blocks. The pressure was on right from the start, but the big worry for Corbett and Balzar was the reliability of the Century Racing CR1.
The Century CR1 is very fast and nimble, but in a season and a half had not finished a race. With the race run at a furious pace, the big question was whether the car would be able to see out the distance.
Behind the special vehicle race leaders, a good battle had developed between Nick and Ryan Harper in the Atlas Copco Bat and Gerard du Plessis and Ferdi Segers in their aging Jimco. The Harpers sneaked ahead of the Jimco, and at this stage of the race were just over a minute behind Mark Corbett and Rudy Balzar, with du Plessis and Segers in hot pursuit.
The Harper lead over du Plessis and Segers did not last long. On a flat stretch, the Jimco sailed past the Bat at a rapid rate of knots and started to disappear into the distance.
Also pushing hard was Shamir Variawa and Siegfried Rousseau in the Total Porter. They were just over 5 minutes behind the race leaders and were being chased by Hannes Grobler and Johan Moore, who were running at the front of the production vehicle field. With dust not a major problem at this stage of the proceedings, Grobler and Moore were also pushing hard to try and open up a gap between them and Anthony Taylor and Robin Houghton in the first of the Castrol Toyota Hilux entries.
Limpopo crew Naeem Musaji and Mohammed Mulston were also not hanging around in the distinctive yellow Jimco. As hard as they were pushing and as quickly as they were going, Musaji and Mulston were being hunted down by Anthony Taylor and Robin Houghton and politely moved over to let the Castrol Toyota Hilux move ahead.
Next on the list for Taylor and Houghton were Class P leaders David and Gary White in the Ruricon Bat. Overtaking without the cooperation of the car ahead is often impossible or a high-risk exercise. But the White brothers are experienced campaigners and also moved over to let the Castrol Toyota pair go through without any problems.
Gary Berthold twice won the Carnival City 400 in a special vehicle, and with the experienced Andre Vermeulen alongside him in the Atlas Copco Toyota Hilux, the pair were in a solid third place. They were just over 2 minutes behind production vehicle leaders Grobler and Moore, and behind them, Evan Hutchinson and Achim Bergman had over 6 minutes to make up on Mark Corbett and Rudy Balzar.
Championship leaders Duncan Foss and Ralph Pitchford were still holding down fourth amongst the production vehicle entries. The Donaldson Nissan Navara crew led a little gaggle of cars that included Van Staden and Rousseau, who were running second in Class P. The second works Castrol Toyota in the hands of Hein Latergan and Chris Birkin, and the factory diesel Ford Ranger of Neil Woolridge and Kenny Scholthammer, who had already made up a place or two.
KwaZulu-Natal driver Don Thompson and Van Gesseling were on a charge in the Zarco, with Van Staden and Rousseau firmly in their sights. The Zarco was being chased by Louis Weichelt and Miret Besadenhout, with the team burning the midnight oil after the prologue to replace the gearbox. Hot on the heels of the Ford were Regent Racing pair Terence Marsh and Pieter Groenewald, who were going along steadily in the Nissan Navara.
Another Regent Racing pair on the move were Mike Whitehouse and Matthew Carlson in the Regent Racing back fitted with a new 600 horsepower engine for this race. A disappointing prologue saw them start 14 minutes behind Mark Corbett and Rudy Balzar, but they were on a charge and steadily working their way through the field.
There was a big fight going on between Class P runners Glenn and Rob Gibson in the Gibson Racing Bat and Christian de Plooy and Henk Janssen van Vieren in the RFS Toyota Hilux. The pair started the day 1 second apart and were still tied together and being chased by Thomas Rundle and Stavros Giannakis, who were desperate for a good result in the second of the factory diesel Ford Rangers.
Simon Beckett and Steve Harris were going along steadily at the front of Class B in the Century Racing Bat and held a slight advantage over veterans Bodo Bertold and Philip Herselman, who were part of the Class P fight in the Atlas Copco Bat. Right behind them were Class D leaders Cliff Weichelt and Johan Smallberger in the N1 Toyota Hilux D4D. They were in turn being chased by Dewald van Breda and Johan de Tooy in the Northam Toyota D4D, and Class E leaders Lau de Bruin and Rian Greiling in the Roacon Ford Ranger.
Aerial footage from the helicopter, sponsored by Botha's Vervoer and 60 kilometers into the first of the two loops that made up the race, all was still well for special vehicle leaders Mark Corbett and Rudy Balzar. Behind them, there was trouble looming, with Gerard du Plessis and Ferdy Seegers simply flying in the Jimco. They'd narrowed the gap down to 18 seconds, and Shamir Variawa and Siegfried Rousseau were also still very much in the picture in the total Porter.
Former champion Hannes Grobler and Johan Moore were still running at the front of the production vehicle category, but retirement was just around the corner, and with it, any lingering hopes they had of mounting a late championship charge. A broken side shaft saw Grobler and Moore pull off on the side of the road, with their race over.
The demise of the Donaldson Nissan Navara handed the lead to the factory Castrol Toyota pair of Anthony Taylor and Robin Houghton. Leading events has been nothing new to the Castrol Toyota crews, with Taylor Houghton and Hein Latergan and Chris Birkin at one stage or another in the lead of every event but one this season.
The reliability problem that has plagued both factory Castrol Toyotas then again reared its ugly head. Latergan and Birkin retired with electrical problems and were joined by Taylor and Houghton just a bit later when a component failed suddenly, leaving the Toyota with no steering.
From the helicopter, the crew of the stranded Toyota cut pretty lonely figures.
Naheem Musaji and Mohammed Molson were still pushing hard in the Tyrak Jimco, but the Polokwane-based crew were gradually being hauled in by championship leaders Evan Hutchison and Achim Bergman in the Motorrad Revo 1. Hutchison and Bergman had cut the gap between the two cars from 90 seconds at the start to just over 40.
More footage from the helicopter ahead of Musaji Mulston and Hutchinson Bergman. The Atlas Copco Toyota Hilux of Gary Berthold and Andre Vermeulen was now leading the production vehicle field. Berthold and Vermeulen were right on the heels of Class P leaders David and Gary White, and lurking ominously behind were championship leaders Duncan Foss and Rolf Pitchford, with the Donaldson Nissan crew only 11 seconds behind the Atlas Copco entry. Matters were starting to hot up.
The retirements of Grobler and Moore in the two Castrol Toyota cars had lifted Neil Woolridge and Kenny Scholthammer into third in the factory Ford Ranger TDCI. The 2007 Carnival City 400 winners looked to be on track for another good result and were ahead of Class P runners Johan van Staden and James Rousseau, as well as Louis Weichelt and Maret Besaidnout, who had a few close shaves, threading their way through a herd of cattle.
Approaching the end of the first loop of the race, the father and son combination of Nick and Ryan Harper were still running strongly in a healthy-sounding Atlas Copco bat. Retirements had also seen former professional cricketer Terence Marsh and Pieter Groenewald move up the pecking order in the Regent Racing Nissan Navara. The Nissan was now fourth in the production vehicle stakes.
The Regent Racing crew of Mike Whitehouse and Matthew Carlson were continuing their steady rise through the field. They were quickly closing in on the Unifreight Ford Ranger in the hands of Harry Smith-based Kobus van Tonda and Rian Guapa. When Whitehouse and Carlson closed right up on the Ford, they were allowed to move ahead without having to use any muscle.
The father and son KwaZulu-Natal crew of Glenn and Rob Gibson were still going strong in the Gibson Racing bat and had a friendly wave for our cameraman. Chasing after them were Thomas Rundle and Stavros Giannakis, and a disappointing season was about to get worse, with the pair managing to roll the factory Ford Ranger.
Bodo Bertolt, father of Gary and Bevan, and Philip Herselman were holding down a solid midfield place, but made a meal of a tricky mud crossing. Bertolt and Herselman were being caught by Hichu and Jaap de Bruin, who were on a charge after their prologue woes and started 6 minutes behind the Atlas Copco bat.
The Century Racing bat in the hands of Simon Beckett and Steve Harris was still leading Class B. Behind them, Thomas Rundle and Stavros Giannakis were going again on the second of the factory diesel Ford Rangers, sounding healthy enough, but looking decidedly worse for wear.
The Free State crew of Louw de Bruin and Rian Greyling were still leading Class E in the Rurikon Racing Ford, with Class B championship leaders Derek de Tooy and Ian Pienaar hot on their heels in the Orange Tree bat. Behind the Cape team, the Potchefstroom pair of Dewald van Bedar and Johan de Tooy had moved into the Class D lead in the Northam Toyota Hilux. Behind the Potchefstroom crew, there was plenty of action when Derek de Tooy and Ian Pienaar in the bat, driven by Bula Boertes and Johan Pretorius, arrived almost simultaneously at a wet stretch. There was mud flying every which way, and it was Boertes and Pretorius who came off second best.
Cliff Weichelt and Johan Smallberger were still running, but were now just over 2 minutes behind Dewald van Breda and Johan de Tooy, and steadily losing ground. Weichelt and Smallberger were also coming into the clutches of reigning Class E champions Jannie Visser and Joks Leroux. The RFS Toyota Hilux was also starting to close in on Louw de Bruin and Rian Greyling in the Rurikon Ford.
Dakar Rally stalwarts Ivar Tollefson and Quinn Evans were also fighting back after a disappointing prologue that saw them start the day nearly a half an hour after time trial winners Hannes Grobler and Johan Moore. Overheating problems were hampering progress, and they were doing battle with the likes of early season Class E championship leaders Dion Venter and Ian Palmer in the 4x4 Mega World Toyota Hilux.
It was also heavy going for Alfie Cox and Jürgen Schroeder, who were debuting the new PS Laser Nissan Navara in preparation for next year's Dakar Rally. Brothers Keith and Andrew Makanete were in the same boat in the Zarko, but were again showing admirable tenacity and the determination that has characterized their season.
Behind the Machanetes, progress for Leroy Polter and Rob Howie in the Feroda Nissan Hardbody was temporarily halted as they tried to find a way around the RFS Toyota Hilux of Christian de Plooy and Henk Janssen van Vieren, which had also rolled.
We just slipped this little bridge here and we fell over onto the left-hand side. Luckily there was some other spectators that helped us out, and earlier we hit a rock and the rim bent around the calipers, so we lost a lot of time, and now the power steering's gone and there's almost no oil left in the engine, so we're just going to call it a day.
After 4 non-finishes in a row, former Blue Bulls scrum half Coetzee Labuschagne and Johan Gerber won the Sun City 400. The Raysonics Nissan hardbody pair were now third in Class D and in line for another good result.